Welcome to the 30th episode of Al's Joint. I'll be joined by my co-host Dennis Painter from Xenia, Ohio, as we update you on the Epstein files and all the other madness coming out of Washington, D.C. So as we pay homage to the main ingredients, everybody plays a fool. Let's take the gloves off and let's get at it. How you doing today, Brother Painter?
I'm doing well. I'm still above ground, and I'm thankful for it.
We have a hell of a lot of news that's breaking out in this country. It seems like every week it doesn't slow down. I hope that the American people understand what we're up against here. So a couple things we want to touch base on. First, the Department of War and the attack that they declared war, I guess, on Venezuela and the drug cartel, they claim, and they blew a boat up in international waters that they claim was headed to the United States. I don't know if you've seen the boat, but I did some research. That boat, it could go up to 250 miles before they got to fill up, but they were 1,000 miles from the United States. So I just say that somebody has some explaining to do. The other thing is that folks are even leery about believing anything that they see from our government, and that's scary. That folks are starting to doubt whether some of this stuff is even true. You got to wonder, were they all involved in some plot to bring drugs in the United States, and these folks turned them? I don't know. You can't believe anything anymore.
I have a lot of questions. They go unanswered by the Trump administration. But first off, they blew up a boat, okay? Then they knew there was 11 people on it, but they're not saying how. And then they're saying, well, they had drugs. Well, how much drugs? Okay. I mean, how they find this stuff out? All right. We don't know that there was drugs on it. And quite frankly, they're claiming it was, somewhere in open waters, 1,000 miles away. It could have been 100 miles off one of our coasts. I mean, we saw the picture. We don't know. But this is one of the cases where they blew up a boat that allegedly had 11 men on it. And they, without having any evidence that they produced, they judged them and they killed them. To me, that's a war crime.
And when you think about it, I need folks to understand that we fought for years against dictators who put their armies in the cities of their country, that targeted minorities in their country, and who would attack other countries without warning. And we're guilty of all of those things now. What do they say? When you're fighting a monster, you have to be careful that you don't become the monster. And the United States has become the monster.
I agree with you that we're becoming something we've never been. We used to be the beacon, show the ships the way in. Now we're the anchor that's sinking everything. We're sinking freedom. We're sinking our Constitution. It's a real shame. And I think it's another diversion, in my opinion, because if you look at the statistics, most of the drugs that come into this country are from Mexico, from the Mexican drug cartel. Colombia is the main source of supplying drugs through the Mexican cartel, and this is research that I found. That the Syria government financed the biggest multi-billion-dollar industry on an illegal drug known as Kepagon. It's being sold, and most of the illegal drugs coming in this country are coming across the Mexican border.
They declared war on Venezuela. They declared war on Chicago and LA, right? And this is important because both of those cities clearly give far more taxes than they get benefits than they get from the federal government. They pay far billions of dollars more in taxes. So these cities help subsidize these so-called red states. I'm not even talking red city. They subsidize red states. That's how much money they're giving to the federal government and federal income tax. Then you would have used the increase the budgets to the police departments in those cities. And I'm not talking money just to increase the number of boots on the ground. I'm talking money that you could use to hire additional social workers to help with the policing, right? A lot of things you could do with that money, not just putting boots on the ground, because we know that's always not a direct correlation to lower crime, just having more police out there. How does it make sense that you're taking millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars from these cities' budget that's really their money, and you're spending that money to send a National Guard in where they're not wanted, in cities where crime has been on a steady decline?
Well, let's put it where it's at. You know, the cities that Trump is targeting are have a high population of Democratic voters. And he's preparing either for the midterms or for the next national election, if we have any. But looking at the statistics, if you're really going after crime and you're really going after drugs, the highest drug use by state is the following. And I'm not going to read all 50 states, okay? But New Mexico, red state. West Virginia, red state. Nevada, red state. Alaska, red state. You know, District of Columbia, blue. Oklahoma, red state. Missouri, red state. That's the top 7 with drug problems. Now, those are the states. Now, where has he sent the National Guard? He sent them to DC. He hasn't sent them to the red states. If you go look where most of the drug use problems are, and it's by how many people per 100,000, most of them in the top 30 are red states.
Deporting everyday immigrants who are here legally. They said that 80% of the immigrants that have been deported were here legally, awaiting time in the process to be declared a citizen or not, or to get the proper paperwork. Here's the kicker. The 20% that's remaining, they're not criminal. They make it, when they give you those numbers, we're talking about 80% of the people have nothing on their jacket. But those 20%, a large portion of those folks, if you have a traffic violation, you're considered in that 20%. If you missed a court date because you were late and you came to the courthouse late and was sent away to the next day, if your name appeared of having missed that court date before you can get your next court date, you're actually considered a felon now in their eyes. So that 20% is not these terrible gang members or anything like that. These are just folks that made any minor mistake. If you got caught with an expired driver's license, that's a felony to them. Those are the folks in that 20%. Less than 2% of folks that they deported committed felonies. People need to understand that other number is not reflective of the folks who committed serious crime. Meanwhile, 8 to 9% of the rest of the Americans commit the 99.9% of the other felonies in this country.
Right. Right. And we're being led to believe that there's only one group of people that commits crime, and that's, immigrants, and that's men, women, and children. They're all criminals, and people unfortunately buy into that. I want to go back to the overall drug thing. The biggest cities with overall drugs use in the United States, and this is in order: Omaha, Nebraska; Wichita; Tulsa; Oklahoma City, and Mesa. They're all tied for runner-up, but no troops have been sent into those cities. He's going to the cities that have a strong Democratic holding, and he's going to be lining troops up to keep people from voting.
It's important that you say that too, because the reason why he's targeting those blue cities, so he can have an excuse to have troops on the ground during the elections in those cities only. If you put them in Oklahoma and those red cities, that would be a problem. It would kind of deter some of his folks from voting, right? So he's making sure that people are used to having troops in the cities where he thinks he can control the vote.
Right. And he's staying away from the cities that have the largest problem or the largest crime related to drugs. And you said this in the last podcast, you could use those troops right here at home. This is where the drugs are, to run down the distributors. But what's he doing? They're running down people with parking tickets and that type of thing and arresting them. And what really gets me, this part is, I just read that this week, 300 people at a Hyundai plant, immigrants working. ICE arrested 300 people out of this facility. Now, it was an auto plant. Now, those people, by law, were paying taxes, state taxes, local taxes, school taxes, okay, Social Security, and federal taxes, by law, okay? Was the employer arrested for not deducting
Nope.
those taxes? No. Was the employer arrested for hiring illegals? No, because they weren't illegals. And this goes back to what you've been saying about the 80%. They were not illegals, but it meets the racist agenda that Trump and the MAGA followers have. Now, it's going to destroy that community or a good portion of it. Now, I don't know the numbers at that auto plant, but if you take 300 people out of that plant, what do you think it's going to do to that plant? Cause interruptions with production. It's going to lower profit for that company until they replace them. And the reason they had the 300 probably is because us white guys didn't want to go there and work. Okay.
That's correct. Us Americans didn't want to go there and work. Another thing, I just want to piggyback on what you're saying. In that neighborhood, there's going to be 150 landlords that aren't going to get paid rent. There's going to be dozens of store owners that aren't going to be able to sell breakfast, lunch, groceries. Right? There's going to be merchandise not purchased, clothing, cars, vehicles. All that's going to be gone from that community. Not one single person at that plant had one iota of a charge of any kind on any of their records. Not one.
And guess what? ICE didn't have a search warrant. Okay. Did not have it.
I want to transition into the Epstein scandal. So we're going to watch this video real quick. I just want to say one thing as we transition. How does a pedophile and a 34-time convicted felon get to have a war on crime? I'll never understand that. Every time he raises something about crime, the first question people should ask him, when will you turn yourself in?
The first question I have, and you're right related to that, is I'm looking at the good, decent Republicans. When are you going to call for him to turn himself in? You know, when are you going to call for true law and order instead of being distracted?
First look tonight at that now infamous birthday book drawing released by Democrats on the House Oversight Committee, who say it was given by President Trump to Jeffrey Epstein years ago. Part of a tranche of documents the committee says it received today after it subpoenaed Epstein's estate. The drawing shows the outline of a woman's torso, breasts and hips, with a message that reads, in part, "We have certain things in common, Jeffrey," and later, "Enigmas never age," before the closing words, "Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." At the bottom, a familiar scroll.
We are back on the other side. This Epstein thing just is sucking the air out of this country. And folks want answers. They want them now. Thank goodness they're starting to get them. As you can see, they released this birthday card that Donald Trump wrote to his friend Jeffrey. And after all the cursing that's going on in the White House, J.D. Vance and the president, for some reason, they have to act tough. They think cursing makes them tough. But they swore that this letter didn't exist. He's suing his friend for billions of dollars because they fabricated this letter. Now this letter's up. It's clearly his signature. And now they're scrambling again to do what they've always done, figure out damage control. How can they sucker their cult following into believing whatever they say?
Well, now they're saying what he was an undercover informant, but who got arrested? Well, Epstein got arrested and he got killed during Trump's administration. And the pedophiles should have been arrested. We're back to the law and order in a way, but it's the Epstein files. If you have the ability to send people down to other countries or troops to Chicago, you have the ability to release these files. And I have quit saying about Republicans as leaders. They are not leaders. They are obstructors of justice. They're elected officials, but they have the ability to bring justice to those women, and they're refusing, while all at the same time is we're tough on law and order.
From the very beginning, from my first podcast until today, I told folks that every bit of evidence that's out there points to him being a pedophile. Not somebody who likes younger women, but a pedophile. I personally don't believe that it matters one bit to the cult base that he's a pedophile. I've been getting hundreds of comments and responses trying to justify what he did. They just overlook the fact. If you have a conversation with them, they'll talk about everything else. You can't ignore the fact that your president is a pedophile and that his best friend was a pedophile. And the person that was their Pied Piper that lured these young girls is about to get pardoned and was moved to a country club. She has information on the pedophiles who are still out there running free. There's only one of them that's dead. The other ones are still alive. And like we said before, I don't care if they're Republican, Democrat, independent, from foreign countries. They need to be tracked down and they need to be made to pay for the damage they've done to those young girls. I seen Donald Trump at the U.S. Open with his granddaughter. His granddaughter is 14 years old. I'm telling people, don't get lost. Go look at him with his 14-year-old granddaughter. That's the age of the girls that they were molesting. We look at them as these grown adults and we forget they were 14 years old.
But we're leaving out that we recently found out there was also underage boys. There's reason for me to believe that Trump liked underage boys as well. Release the file, we'll find out whether or not that's a fact or not. If you look at the pictures that's been released, and you'll see Epstein and Trump together, but you see other people there too. And Trump knows who those people are, at least some of them. And he's protecting those pedophiles. I mean, and so is Maxwell by not saying who they are.
If you're a pedophile, if I commit a crime, I don't care who committed a crime with me if I'm not snitching. I just don't want my name out there. He's in survival mode now, and he's not worried about his cult. So folks need to understand that he's not worried about his base. He knows his 35%. When they said he can go out on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and they still vote for him, those folks still exist. Those folks would give their 14-year-old daughter or granddaughter up to Donald Trump if they thought that's what he needed to keep going. Those are the people, you don't have to worry about them. But for everybody else, that's who he's concerned about, because you can't win the midterm with his base. It's not going to happen. If he thought his base was big enough to win the midterm, he would say, I don't care what you do, release the files, and I'm going to destroy this country anyway.
I want to go back to something you said that's very important about not snitching, okay? He's also sending a message that depending on who you are, being a pedophile is okay. It's accepted. If you got enough money, it's okay. And the MAGA folks need to look at their own sons and daughters. That's who the pedophile could come after next. They need to look at their granddaughters and their grandsons and say they could be subject to the same abuse.
I might be being cynical here. I don't believe that they care. I don't believe that they care that their 14-year-old children, daughters or granddaughters or sons or grandsons, I don't think they care if they could be the next targets, as long as they win now with what Donald Trump is doing and offering them. That's their base. My thoughts are that everybody else has to pick up. Everybody else has to push forward, because I'm going to protect mine. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to protect my grandkids from people like Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Another thing we have to touch base on is when Epstein was out, there was a woman who gave an interview, and she said that when she was 14-year-old, Epstein molested her while he was out on leave. What do they call it when you leave the
house arrest?
Yes, he was out on house arrest, and there was a police officer guarding the door. That tells you right there that this man didn't care. How can Donald Trump say that he was around him, his best friend, and if he's willing to do that in front of the police officer, you think he wouldn't have done it with and in front of Donald Trump?
I want to clarify something. You know, you talking about the MAGA supporters don't care about their children, and it's okay. One is, I think there's people that identified as MAGA when he was running that may not identify as MAGA now. The 35% you're talking about will never change their mind. But there was people in between, MAGA folks that I'm talking to and saying, look, you know, there's nothing wrong with making a mistake. Don't be ashamed. Just don't make it again. Let's do something about it. Now's the time to speak up. You know, there's no shame in making mistakes. We've all made mistakes. I've made mistakes. Okay. There's no shame in that. The shame comes when something of importance like this, and you don't realize the mistake that you made and you do something about it. And they just removed a peace camp from outside of the White House. It's been there for 44 years. Okay. Just removed it. That's okay. It wasn't homeless people, you know, wasn't any of that. But they're going to say that's okay, you know, because in my opinion, I think they'd be happy with war. And I think, quite frankly, unfortunately, we're headed towards a civil war. All this stuff with the troops and all that, they've been trained to contain and kill.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we're headed into a bright spot by any means, but Americans, they have to make a decision. How far are you willing to go to protect your country and your rights under your Constitution? I say, as Malcolm said, by any means necessary. That brings us to the end of another episode, my friend. I look forward to talking to you again next week. And hopefully the temperature in this country will come down a little bit by then. Thank you for watching this episode of Al's Joint. Don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. But also leave your comments because I'm interested in what you're thinking. If you're a MAGA cult member, to be honest with you, I don't give a damn what you're thinking because everybody plays the fool. Join me next Friday on my next podcast. Peace.
This episode of Al's Joint is brought to you by the Peabody Highlander 1975 through 1981 Class Reunion Committee.